Calamari Salutations everyone, Squid here and SouthSideBraves bringing you another Power Rankings video. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here for another week of the Power Rankings.
Yeah, thanks for checking out the video, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we'll just leave you a few moments to appreciate the nice intro that I made. So, Braves actually helped me for this one. Enjoy the memes and we'll start out with the newest coach on the league, King Souza and his Cold Summer Assassins. The Hustle Gods and King's Rog unfortunately had to drop out of the league due to personal reasons. We wish him all the very best luck in his real life. But we welcome then King Souza with the roster changes he made. He basically kept the Urshifu and changed the remainder of the team. I like the Urshifu single strike very much. I've used it before and I know how much of a beast he can be. Jirachi is a nice all-rounder mon, which has 100 base stats all around. Sylveon is a good mon, not quite my style, but I can see why it's good. Flygon is a mon that's very versatile and I like very much. And there's Dunsparce. Dunsparce is still picked and I'm still amazed by that.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Dunsparce, and I like the top of his team very much. The Urshifu, Jirachi, Sylveon, and Flygon, those top four, I like very much. The Decidueye I always like in theory. Never seems to work out as well as I think it could, but
I get the same feeling also.
Yeah, hope work. But again, I like the top of his roster. And again, you mentioned, I hope everything's all right with Kingdrock in his real life. Wish him all the best. I do kind of wish we could have seen Sosa take over this team 1 week earlier, because I know this team just played Arts, and I know Sosa and Arts always have some very heated matchups.
Yes.
So it would have been nice to see him take over 1 week earlier, but unfortunately we did not. And that's kind of why you see him in this unranked position right now, because we haven't got to see him play in this league. But I know Sosa can bring, and I'm expecting some good matchups from him.
Yeah, he's definitely a good battler, and I know he will perform very well. So, next up, in the 15th place and the first ranked team, it's unfortunately the commissioner of the league, Sen.
Yeah, so in this 15th spot we have the Blazikens and Coach Sen. And I think if anyone were to say how rough of a start he's had the most, it'd be himself. I think Sen has been very hard on himself for the season, and it's been rough, but he's made some changes this week, adding a couple mons to hopefully bounce back and start getting in the win column. He had a nice little set going with the Moltres, the Galarian Moltres last week. Unfortunately, with the Thunder Wave and maybe not being able to get up another agility that might have been able to help, unfortunately didn't work out as well as it looked like it might have when he was first rolling with it. Yeah, that's why he finds himself down in this 15 spot. 2 rough losses to start the season. But I like Sen. I think he's done a great job running the league. I hope the couple roster moves helps him bounce back in this league and in this season.
Yeah, you did mention the Moltres. Just a little bit of advice. When Moltres was paralyzed, there was a turn where Sen clicked Fiery Wrath the first turn, and in that instance, I think the best move would actually be to Agility once again, so the Moltres would still outspeed a lot of the enemy team, and the Fiery Wrath would be able to KO the Miltank once the Nasty Plot and the Berserker boost both got into action. So there was a tiny bit of improvements there to be made, but nonetheless the paralysis did come that turn, so it ended up not mattering much. Yes, so next up we have the Philadelphia Melmetals, and boy did this team fall from grace from the first week. This coach, in our opinion, did have a phenomenal roster, but they just weren't translating the roster they had into the matches, so I don't see a problem with making changes to a roster that it just isn't working for you. It may be good in theory, but if it doesn't work for you, you just have to stick with something else. Unfortunately, this week too, the Melmetals did have a tall order in front of them. They had to play the champion, and the champion did champion things against him. They didn't have much answer to the Sceptile once the Ferrothorn went down. And speaking of Ferrothorn, in front of the Dragonite, Staying in with the Ferrothorn wasn't the best of ideas because Dragonite can run both physicals and special sets, and it has an insane coverage to its move pool, so I would have checked scouted the fire move just to be sure it had it or it didn't, something like that. And I liked the momentum with the Claydol a little bit more this match, but it did stay in when the Sceptile set up, but at that point the damage was already done. And the other thing I'd like to mention is actually the Archeops in front of the Tentacruel. That to me is a case of lack of confidence. I don't see any other reason why the Archeops doesn't attack that turn. I know it would be in defeatist range, but ultimately if you don't attack your opponent, you're just not gonna win the game, because the game is about KOing enemy Pokemon, and if you don't attack, you won't KO them. So I think that's pretty much it for what I wanted to say about this coach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you briefly mentioned it. I think the biggest problem with this coach that we're seeing right now is, of any coach in the league, I think they're playing the most timid. If they make more confident decisions, have more confidence in the sets they're bringing into the match, I think they'll see a big boost in play. You mentioned the Archeops turn and not attacking the Tentacruel. That right there is a case in point of making a timid decision instead of going aggressive with what you have on the field. So I'm hoping the changes, while I personally kind of like the roster better the way it was than it is now, hopefully these changes do give this coach a little jolt of confidence and they can make better decisions in the matches and make them more competitive and start picking up some wins. So I really do think for this coach, it just really comes down to confidence. But talking about a bright side, I did like his the way he used Dragalge in the match, or Dragalge. I thought that was definitely his MVP of the match. I thought it played pretty well. So it did show glimpses that he can make good decisions and win some matches. I just think he has to do it more consistently and, like we said, make confident decisions.
So next up, we have a coach that really doesn't lack confidence.
Yeah, next up we have the Ender Teddy Ursas, who unfortunately also fall to 0-2. Highlighting the Galoric here in the middle of the screen. I did really like that set with the gravity, and it kind of caught his opponent off guard. Unfortunately, wasn't able to capitalize on it too much and get a ton of momentum out of it. While it was cool, it didn't really result in much advantage in the match. And then, unfortunately, he just didn't bring much for the Dragapult, in all honesty. He didn't have many switch-ins, a couple poor decisions here and there. Once that Dragapult got in and he lost his answer to it, he was done through his own emission, like he mentioned, like halfway through the battle. I think he was talking about it in his video. Dragapult sweep from here, Dragapult sweep from here. There was nothing he could do about it at that point. So that lack of Dragapult prep really cost him in this match.
To be fair, it's kind of hard to prep against a Dragapult, but
True.
there were things he could have improved on. First things first, not bringing Scarflatios was a mistake, because he had nothing to outspeed the Dragapult. Second mistake was just sacking the mons that could outright survive one hit from the Dragapult. There weren't that many more mistakes made in the match, but those were big mistakes, and the mon like Dragapult will capitalize big time on them. Coming up next, we have the 6th Street Viper, and I've talked about this match in my clean sweep video, and I like this match has a lot to talk about. Oh my god, so where do I start? Lantern. Sharky, why did you click Thunderbolt on the Lantern? Why? You just had seen that it was Assault Vest because of the damage of the Hurricane on it. It was walling the Zapdos for days, and there isn't much reason to click Thunderbolt there. You wanted to be sure it was Volt Absorb? I mean, the team that Bishmi had screamed Volt Absorb, so I really don't know why that decision was made. I think it was just to buy time to think a little bit more, but it ended up costing big time, because later down the match, the HP you healed on the Lantern would actually have mattered, because it would have been KO'd quite earlier in the match, and that means the Zapdos is more free to run rampant through Bishmi's team. So that fateful turn, oh my god, the game did really try to to make the Survivors win this week, but unfortunately the game also made justice the next turn by making the Hurricane miss. There was another mistake. Oh yes, the Barracuda. So it hurts me so much when Bishmi is talking about in his video why that Barracuda is so scary for his team and he basically has nothing to outspeed it and outright KO it. And then you sack the Barracuda. What? Because you over prioritized a special Talon Flame over Barracuda, and the special Talon Flame, like the Zapdos, was tanked by the Lantern. Two very questionable decisions led you to a defeat, and gotta say the matchup wasn't in your favor, but with you making those mistakes you really didn't want to win this week.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. You mentioned how the matchup going into it was not in his favor to begin with, and it really wasn't. But definitely the Zapdos Thunderbolt on the Lantern was, in the nicest way, the most questionable decision of the week. And I love Barracuda. Barracuda is one of my favorite Mons this generation, and I never get to see it really in Draft League. And to watch it go down the way it went down hurt a little bit inside. Yeah, just some major misplays in this match. And you, like you said, Zapdos tried to RNG carry this team back into the match.
Yes,
hitting
definitely.
Hurricane after Hurricane, dodging a Thunder Fang. It tried everything it could to bring this team back and pick up a win. But unfortunately, it did fall short. Yeah, this team finds itself sitting at number 12.
But make no mistake, if that last Hurricane hit, he would have won the match.
Yes.
Oh my god. Next up, we have the 3 Electrons.
So I'm just going to get it out of the way early. The big moment of this match that was talked about was his opponent's Garchomp only hitting 2 scale shots. And just right out of the bat, I'm going to say if 3 scale shots hit, this obviously is a loss for this coach. And so that being said, is kind of part of the reason he finds himself the lowest of the winning coaches. But all that being said, he did pick up the win this week. He was able to use Landorus Incarnate form much better than he did week 1. Because again, another Mon that went down way too soon and it hurt inside week 1 performed much better this week, picking up a few kills for him. Yeah, just the luck of that play, not hitting 3 times, he was able to kind of capitalize on his opponent not really having a backup plan once that happened. Landorus Incarnate was kind of able to take care of it from there.
Yeah, we finally see some of Landorus Incarnate shining in the battle, and you can see why I said this was a first pick worthy pick, because it hits so hard. There's basically no way to switch into it. It's just so good and it's amazing, and it will win you battles outright. But like you said, the Scale Shot only hitting twice was basically the game defining turn of the match, and there's not much else to say from this coach besides that. Now we're going to move on into the number 10, and the number 10 is the Brisbane Real Boomers. So they did face against Braves this week. This coach did have a shining light in the beginning of the match, with the Hitmontop really applying pressure all over the opponent's team. Hitmontop was on the field. It outright clicked triple axel in front of the Landorus and it would have killed. Then the triple axel did miss, but he then was in front of the Marowak and was able to 1v1 it with Earthquake, and then the nice prediction on top of the Marowak switching out, so that with the rapid spin he not only removed the rocks from the field, but also was outspeeding the Landorus at that turn. So the Hitmontop did apply a lot of pressure early game. Those 2 misses from the triple axel hurt, but I think they hurt more the mental state of the coach rather than the actual state of the battle, because the mons that would have been hit, basically how the match played out, I don't think it would have made that huge of a difference. But then from the middle of the battle onwards, we see this coach starting to make some mistakes. The first mistake was switching in the Zygarde directly on the Landorus. It wasn't necessary, and it really did cost this coach, because the next turn the Landorus just KO'd it with the Outrage. And then once the Landorus was locked into Outrage, this coach tried to make a double into the Rotom, fearing the fly from the Landorus, and that resulted in Rotom being much lower than it should have been. And with the Rotom lower, the Electivire was basically just free to start running wild on the enemy team at that point. That wasn't what happened, but another thing to mention is that the Rocks resists from this coach, the Zygarde and the Hitmontop, they both went down early in the match, and that meant that the 4 remaining Mons were all weak to Rock, or at least hit neutrally, and basically from the coverage that the opponent had, they could spam Rock moves all day long, and there wasn't much more that this coach could do to survive that.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of hit on the highlights of that match. His play with the Hitmontop at the beginning was definitely awesome. Like you said, I knew my Landers were slower, especially off the Intimidates, so I wanted to switch out. He 1v1 the Marowak. I thought at the time I could switch back into Landers and deal with it, but he made the great prediction, went for the Rapid Spin, and once he was out speeding, I was on the back foot early. So his beginning of the game, like you said, played phenomenal, but the Zygarde getting hit by the fly and then taking an Outrage really hurt him. He relies on that Zygarde, and it can put in a ton of work, but unfortunately he let it go down pretty early in the match. And I did mention before that I thought the Thunderbolt on Lantern was the most questionable decision of the week. The double while I was locked into Outrage, that's also in the running for it, and he admitted it. Like, if you watch his video, he forgot I was locked and made that unnecessary double that resulted in Rotom taking about 40% damage that it didn't need to. So that was unfortunate for him. And I mean, we all have brain farts when we're playing. Yeah, and so it happens. And then, unfortunately for him, I did fear the Araquanid quite a bit going into the match. So I think I had rock moves on like 4 or 5 of my Pokemon, either Rock Slide or Stone Edge. I wanted to make sure I dealt with it. And once the Zygarde was down, Araquanid was kind of the biggest threat left. I was able to take care of it with those rock moves, like you said.
But we'll speak a little bit more about you later down the line. But for now, I'll let you speak about the SydneySix.
Yep, so next up we have the SydneySix, which right off the bat, let me apologize to. I said last week that whoever Mountay played next, I was going to apologize to because of he told me I had lit a spark in him. So, and you could just tell by his play in this match that it appeared that way, that there was a spark lit. So unfortunately for the 6, he had to go up against that coach this week. But even that being said, there were some plays that the SydneySix could have made that could have maybe changed the outcome of this. The Mandibuzz on his opponent's side kind of just sat in his face the whole time, and he never really dealt with it as well as he maybe could have. You mentioned the item on the Heatran, thank you. I don't know why his name was escaping me. The blunder policy on a Heatran when it's switching that much in a match and it's one of your pivot mons kind of seems like an odd choice that didn't really benefit him in this match too much. Yeah, that was kind of a weird decision. This match I thought was pretty well played on both sides, to be honest. One of the huge mistakes. One of the longer matches, bunch of switch-ins and that, but unfortunately he just never dealt with that Mandibuzz as well as he could have, and that's what I think ended up costing him in the long run in this match. That's why I think he picked up the 3-0 loss this week.
One thing that I would like to mention is the first turn that the Celebi comes in. Celebi is scarfed and it's in front of the Heracross, which is also scarfed. And at that point, there's a decision where he clicks Expanding Force. And I know the move hits hard, but when the enemy still has a Dark type on their team, it's kind of a gamble. But the thing is, you didn't have to gamble because clicking Dazzling Gleam was the optimal play there. Dazzling Gleam hits both the Heracross and Mandibuzz, so it's basically a no-brainer clicking Dazzling Gleam there. So clicking Expanding Force did cost a lot of momentum in this match for this coach. And the other, I wouldn't call it a mistake, I would call it rather a tough decision, was with the Tapu Lele in front of the Silvally. They have both 95 speed base stat, so it was a speed tie between them. This coach had to make a decision: either go for Psychic and try to KO the Silvally, or try to KO it with the Moonblast. They did click Moonblast, fearing the Mandibuzz switch in, but unfortunately Moonblast wasn't enough to KO the Phil Valley, and what that meant is that his coach sacked Scrafty the next turn, and by sacking Scrafty, from that point onwards they were never going to win because the Spectrier just won the match from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to throw one last thing in before we move on. I would love to see how this match would have went if he had clicked that Dazzling Gleam the first time when Heracross was in and got the Mandibuzz. If he takes that down, I think this match would still be close, and I think it would be a very exciting finish. So I kind of wish he had so we could see how that would have turned out.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Monte when his time comes up, but first we have to talk about the new kid in the block, which is Arts and its Rustboro City Rejects. And Arts just showed that he came to play on this league with his Crobat leading the match and finishing the match. So Crobat went in early game and just started racking up damage on the enemy team. Arts then, with some pivoting around, ended up with the Urshifu on the field and clicked Substitute on a predicted switch-in from the opponent. And that Urshifu really, I like to see it very much. The Urshifu was really exquisite in the way that Arts played him. I really liked the turn where he took damage from the Nidoking and he subbed once again, knowing the Nidoking was faster. So he could take the future sight damage and not die from there. Going for Substitute was actually what the optimal play there, because he then survived the Earth Power from the Nidoking and was able to revenge kill it with the Drain Punch, which was a not very effective move, but since he was at +2, it ended up killing it. And then from that point onwards, the Crobat just entered the fields later down the line. It clicked Nasty Plot and the game was history.
So you mentioned the cool play with the Urshifu and the Substitute, but outside of that, the way I would sum up this match was Crobat, Crobat, Crobat. The Crobats that was awesome to see with the Giga Drain, especially denting holes in his opponent. I know the first time he got Crobat in, he really wanted to set up the Nasty Plot and try to put in a ton of work with it. But unfortunately, he didn't get the opportunity to do that. Then Crobat came back in later in the match and was able to do that. And you saw what power it had once it did have that Nasty Plot up and just completely devastated his opponent. Crobat, I think, was my favorite mon of the entire week to see. He absolutely put in a ton of work with it.
Yeah, this match basically displayed why I highlighted Crobat in the pre-draft analysis.
I've never gotten to use Crobat in a competitive setting, I think ever, but what I saw out of it definitely shows its capability for sure.
So now we're going to move on into the other side of the SydneySix matchup, and it's the Immunity Idols in 7th place.
Yeah, so we mentioned a little bit about Coach Mounte and the Immunity Idols earlier. What a bounce back performance. Comeback Player of the Week, if that's a award.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely bounced back from the week 1 performance. I thought maybe the most well-played game of a single coach this week, to be honest. And like week 1, Mandibuzz was a detriment to his team, in all honesty. It came in and unfortunately allowed his opponent, which happened to be me, put in holes into his team. This week, it did the exact opposite. This week, it was a great pivot for him. It sat in front of his opponent's entire team, and he was never able to deal with it. Yeah, Mandibuzz was just the anchor to his fantastic performance this week that sees this coach climb back up to 7.
Yeah, not much else to say about Monte. One reason also that the Mandibuzz was not a detriment to this coach this week was because Mounte was playing more prediction based, because he was reading his opponent more, because he didn't feel as much in the back foot as last week. And I think that basically gave him the necessary confidence to make the correct plays with the Mandibuzz.
So if Mounte plays like this in future matches, like I said, watch out. He's a very dangerous coach.
Yeah, so moving on into the number 6 spot, we have a coach that fell from grace, if we can say that, in regards to last week. It's the Miami Hitmore, and it's I think it's the highest of the coaches who lost this week.
That would be correct.
That's because we didn't decide to penalize this coach that much, because ultimately they lost on a 12.5% chance. Those are odds that you most of the times take. The one thing I didn't like was at the beginning of the match. Relicanth, cool set, very cool set. I highlighted it as hit of the week. It worked until the point where Aldra tried to force it too much. Sometimes people get so caught up on their tech that they want to make it work so bad that they end up forcing the plays, they end up making not optimal plays, and proccing the cust up at that point wasn't what I would have done. The switch into the Primarina I think was pretty safe. You even had the Kazib Berry to stop the poison move from the Como if it needed be. At that point you could have preserved the Relicanth and then bring it later down the match to liquidate the Landorus, maybe being the biggest threat from the opponent that would have been hit by a liquidation. Then you just positioned the Garchomp quite nicely, gotta say, but unfortunately the scale shot only hit twice, and since Aldra didn't have a plan B, he just rolled over and died. That's basically it.
Yeah, you mentioned the percentages. I'm a big gambler. I like going to casinos, playing some poker, and if you tell me I got 87.5% chance of winning, I'm going to take that chance. So unfortunately for him, it didn't work for him this week. And like you said, he didn't really have a plan B. Like I said, I don't know if I would have either personally. I would have thought, oh, this match is over, Garchomp wins. But having a plan B would have been nice. But like you said, he's still in that 6th spot, still the highest of losing coaches, because honestly, he probably should have won the match. I mean, that Garchomp was in a position. You mentioned the cool set on Relicanth. Didn't quite do as much as we probably wanted it to with the set it had. But what can you do? I mean, this match really came down to that skill shot, and I don't really know what else to throw in besides that at this point.
Yes, this will be known as the skill shot match.
Yep.
So, coming in at number 5, we have the Cerulean City Mewtwo and Mr. Luke Harry.
Yeah, so like you said, we got the Mewtwo coming in. They were definitely the most impressive of the losing coaches in week 1. And now in week 2, they pick up a pretty impressive 4-0 victory over the Blazikens. So even though they're 1-1, they're just as scary as anyone in the league right now. And what has me terrified as their week 3 opponent, and should have the rest of his opponents in the future worried, is, like we've mentioned in the past, that Mew. Week 1, he brought a trapping, blocking type Mew. And then in week 2, he brings one with multiple attacks that is offensive and scary in that way. So I personally have no idea what to plan for with the Mew, and I doubt any of his other future opponents will have any idea what to plan for. Just kind of got to wish for the best. Not to mention he also has a Dracovish to back that up. But even with those mons, his star of the week was definitely his Whimsicott. He did a great job prepping, noticing that a Choice Specs Whimsicott really disrupts his opponent's entire roster. So seeing that, that's exactly what he brought, and that's exactly what happened. Whimsicott with the Choice Specs just dismantled his opponent's team and really led to that big 4-0 victory, and sees this coach cracking the top 5 in the rankings because of it.
I wouldn't be surprised if this coach was top 3 next week. Sorry.
Yeah, that means you think he's going to beat me.
Yeah, but we'll move on to the Trash Town Thevals. First things first, the other side of the Hexy match. Bishop did play his cards right. There's not much to say. He threatened the rain from turn 1 with the Executor on the Politoed. He pivoted the match really nicely in the beginning with the Corviknight and the Lantern, moving around between those because they basically walled everything on the enemy team. Bishmi was in a really good position to win the match when it was 3-1, and then that fateful turn happened. Basically, the Boltund missed the Thunderfang into being critted from a Hurricane from the Zapdos and KO'd because of that. And if Bishmi doesn't dodge that next Hurricane, he would have lost the match, even though he definitely played better than his opponent. Not scalding the first turn with the Mantine was kind of questionable decision. But despite that, he played the Bolton beautifully, the mon that we highlighted. And Bolton, every time Bolton came in, he basically claimed the KO with a Life Orb and Thunderfang against the Rain team. They could just shred the opponent. And yeah, basically Bishmi played really well, and he really did deserve to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that Bolton, who, if not for that miss into the crit, could have been one of the top kill leaders of the week, I believe. So, I mean, he played it really well. It put in a ton of work for his team. And I mentioned before some of the most questionable decisions. If I could say a best reaction for the week, it would definitely be Bishmi's video when that play happened. The crit or the missed Thunderfang into the crit Hurricane. Bishmi's reaction to that is quite funny. And
yeah, because the first time the Thunderfang missed, and he's already reacting like watching away from the screen. And then when he looks back and he finds that the Hurricane KO'd the Bolton. Oh my.
Yeah, great reaction, and would have been very disheartening if I was in his place.
Yes, exactly. By the way, speaking of reactions, his reaction to the enemy sacking Barraskewda was hilarious also.
Which, again, was a questionable decision, but we won't go back and hark on that. We'll talk about how well Bishmi played and what that sees him as one of the 4 unbeaten teams left in the league.
Yes, exactly. So moving on to another unbeaten league, we'll move on to the Hellblaze Volcaronas at number 3.
Yeah, so we have the Volcaronas here. It's tough to say much about this team right now at this point of the season. Week 1, he kind of had a double, just sweep through a team. Week 2, he kind of had a Dragapult, just sweep through a team. So, I mean, it was kind of a repeat with a new Mon. You mentioned that dominating opponent that bad one week might be seen as lucky or misplay or misprep by your opponent. Doing it two weeks in a row has to have people thinking this coach really knows what he's doing if he can dominate teams as badly as he is so far. But yeah, I mean, his prep is just resulting in huge deficit games that are giving him huge advantages in the match.
Yes, exactly. You put it right. Happening once, not that much big of a deal. Sometimes you just find a key set that just destroys the opponent's team. Happening twice in a row, people start to wonder, okay, maybe this is not just luck of the draw. Maybe there's some skill involved. And gotta say, if this happens once again this week, it pretty much puts this coach close to the champion, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we're going to move on into the Nashville Nido Kings, a team that SouthSideBraves knows very well. And the reason he's at number 2 this week is because, well, he's still undefeated. And the other main thing is that he was down in the match, and the Hitmontop really did pressure him early game, but he maintained composure and was able to make a really good play that basically brought him momentum back in the match, and it's ultimately what won him the match, which is the double. So with the Copperaja in front of the Hitmontop, he pulled the switch into the Marowak expecting the fighting move. After that, he then doubled into the Landorus expecting the Earthquake once again, and it was a beautiful pivot into an offensive position without taking damage. And with the Landorus on the field at that point, he could just press the fly, make the offensive play, something that we mentioned that other coaches in the league aren't confident enough in making the play. SouthSideBraves pressed the switch at the right time, he clicked fly on that turn. He was rewarded with the Zygarde, although questionable switching, it was a play that rewarded him, and then he could just outright KO the biggest enemy threat. And from that point, he just had to manage the situation because he was in an advantageous position. So he just played his cards right to get the Copperaja to clean late game. So nothing to say. Brilliant double to put him in the match winning position. Then just capitalize on the opponent's mistakes to net him the win.
Yeah, and again, I don't like talking about my own match too much, so I'm not going to say much. I'm just going to say how thankful I am to be this high in the rankings and to be 2-0. 2 weeks into the season because I know the talent of the coaches in this league. I know how tough that is against this caliber of competition. So, yeah, I'm thrilled to be where I'm at, and it was a good game, and I felt positive about it.
Yeah, you should. But you're not quite on the champs level still.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Toros were the undisputed number one of the rankings right now. We had them at number one last week, and they absolutely did nothing to question that decision this week. They knew what the win con was to just get Sceptile in with the terrain up, and at that point, he knew what he could do and just sweep through the enemy team. So yeah, that Sceptile really gave him a comfortable win here. Like I said, he's the reigning champ for a reason. We know what he's capable of, and he's continuing to show it week in and week out so far. Yeah, I would look out for him potentially attempting to repeat that title, and if you're one of his opponents coming up, try to take away that undefeated title from him, because right now he's looking real dangerous.
Yes. One thing I'd like to mention, the Bronzong, without an item, it's not every day that you see a Pokemon without an item. There's some instances where it makes sense. This coach's reasoning for why it didn't have an item also made sense, because that Frostlass was a scary matchup for this team. It ended up working differently because the Frostlass didn't come to the match, but the knockoff from the Ferrothorn was weakened because of it, so it kind of ended up working out also. The Dragonite managing to KO the Ferrothorn was the biggest factor in this coach having won this match, basically.
Yeah, Ferrothorn being the one thing on his opponent's team that could possibly stop the Sceptile. Getting rid of that with the Dragonite was huge. And yeah, that Bronzong not having an item was really cool, really smart, and I'm glad it, even without the Frost Lass, it still did something for him because it was a very smart move.
Yes, exactly. The champ making smart moves. Who would have thought?
Exactly.
Yeah, so this basically concludes the power rankings for this week. Once again, it was a blast doing this. Thank you, SouthSideBraves, to doing this with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on here. I enjoyed doing it. Look forward to next week's.
Yeah, looking forward for the next week's. But until then, Squid and SouthSideBraves jetting out.